Hi, this is Jeff from the Ozark Mountains. That's in Missouri, in the USA. Well, it's September, and that means Septandy, so I thought I would kick off this auspicious occasion by looking at this Tandy Portable Disk Drive 2. Now, I bought this from the fellow that owned it, and it worked great until he accidentally knocked it off a table, and you can see it's kind of had a pretty good knock. And there's a little crack in the case here. And I've had this for a couple months. It was on a Ferengi Friday quite a while ago. And I've had it sitting on the bench, and I kept thinking I would get to it. I was like, well, heck, now it's Septandy. It's a great time to look at this. I think the first thing we'll do is pop the case open and have a look at the switch area where it got the knock. There's a little ribbon cable that connects the power supply to the switch, and that's pretty fragile sometimes. So we'll take a look there, make sure we've got all our power supply voltages, do all the normal checks, and see where it leads us. Well, let's get started. Thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. They do circuit boards of all sizes, small circuit boards, medium circuit boards. They can even assemble them for you. Be sure to check out their website and the 4th design contest, which is running right now. So head on over to PCBWay for all of your PCB needs. Well, let's see what we have here. We can see it definitely got knocked in this corner. And in fact, there is a slight crack right about there. So we'll pop this apart and have a good look inside. And as I mentioned, we'll check this ribbon cable, check out the power supply, and then go from there. Got a few Phillips screws here. There we go. And then I kind of lift up that top cover and sneak it back like that. There we go. This thing's in good shape. And just right there is that ribbon cable that I talked about. I've had to replace one of those before because sometimes they just crumble. And we can see the mechanism. There's nothing obviously wrong with that. The fella even shipped it with the protection card in there, which is nice. And it opens and closes well. And to get that front cover off, first thing I'm going to do is take some of this magic blue painter's tape. Put a piece over the eject button to hold it in place. And I'll do the same thing with the power button to hold it in place. This makes assembly much easier. These are also the same size as the other case screws. No worries about getting them mixed up. Okay. I'm just going to wiggle that guy out of there like that. And you see the buttons are just loose in here, and a little bit of tape holds them in place. And what do we see here? Well, oh, look, our LED got knocked loose. And that must have been the point of contact. Everything else looks okay. And if we look in the battery compartment, don't see signs of corrosion that we can see from here. The other springs are hidden in that end. And there are a couple of screws here. Notice this one has this plastic bushing. And there are a couple of screws on the power switch. So what we can do there is just start them back in the same holes. That way, when we go to put this back together, we know right where they go. Oh yeah, boy, that LED popped right off there, didn't it? Okay. These are kind of a tricky thing to work out of the bottom case. Gotta hold your mouth just right. And you see you've got the connection here from the battery compartment. Oh, goodness. Bumped the camera there, didn't I? Okay, so now we have our power supply out of there. And our bottom case, and yeah, our battery contacts looks nice. And the whole power supply does unplug from the drive right here. And that's a keyed connector, so you can't get it plugged in backwards unless you really, really try. And we'll pull him out. Don't see anything really obvious on the power supply. Maybe a little bit of a lack of solder at that solder joint. But nothing looks like it got bonked off of the board when it fell. You know, big components like the transformer here are always a concern. Okay, hopefully I've got a belt for this. So it looks like we'll just need to do a cleaning. And otherwise it looks nice in there. Hopefully the home sensor didn't get messed up, because then we'll have to play with that to get it aligned again. We're going to have to... You can see how the belt looks like it's coming off of the roller there. Yeah, that might be a problem, so we'll have a look at that and try to clean up the leftover belt goo. And there's another shot of the belt. Yeah, it looks like it's kind of ridden up on the drive motor end too, so the speed is probably wrong now. That might be the biggest problem. So we'll take care of that LED issue. We'll take a look at the belt. The belt looks like it's in good shape. It's just out of position. Then we'll give it a clean and lube and try it out. Here is our little power supply board with the switch and LED. And both leads on that LED have broken loose. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to desolder the pads on these leads. Get them off of there. Yeah, they're being difficult. There's one. It ripped the pads, and so if we could straighten the leads up now. And pop that guy out of there. If you can see here, the large flag is toward the left side of the board. Oh yeah. Actually, that trace is still somewhat connected. There. Okay. Now, if we can get the solder out of there. This pad is completely missing, but it just runs down to here. The problem is that LED has nothing to hold it in place other than these pads. And this pad is still there. It's still connected to the trace. You've seen me use this paste circuit recently to repair a board. And I also have the same types of ferrules, which I got in a kit from AliExpress. These have some larger sizes in here I think I might be able to use to repair these traces here. I picked out a couple ferrules for my kit from AliExpress that are about the right size for this circuit board for the hole and the thickness. And I found a drill bit of the correct size to match the ferrule outer diameter. And I will very carefully drill this hole out by hand. This is single-sided board. And it's phenolic, it feels like and looks like. So we'll just take it nice and slow. There, we finally got through it. Now we'll make sure our ferrule will slip through there. Oh yeah, that works. Okay. Yeah, tricky little bugger. Can't see that. I cut the original pad off there since it was loose anyhow. And I'll clean up that trace like that. Now I've got some trace segments I machined out, and they are not as good as the ones from Pace, but I think they might work for a job like this. Set it down on the circuit board. I'm going to use my pokey tool to align it. And we'll try to slip that ferrule through there. There we go. That's how it should work. Okay, and the whole point of this is we'll have a good mechanical connection for the LED now. And I've got this part of the trace going over the original trace on the board. I'm going to clean up a little more of that, get rid of the solder mask. Like that. He's in a good spot. And I want to do this. I'll hold the trace in place. This ferrule is actually a little longer than what's ideal. I got the one done, and I'll show you what I finally wound up with. So I've got another homemade trace segment here. Could have used one out of the Pace kit as well. I'm going to try to get him roughly into place. If I had a way of holding this board a little better, that would help a lot. Then I went to using one of the Pace ferrules. These form easier. I think they are just tin coated copper, whereas the ones from AliExpress are some type of brass, which is much harder to form. Even though the listing said they were copper. There we go. Okay. Now we got the ferrule. Got the ferrule through the trace, through the circuit board. And we want to make sure that our trace segment is rotated around as we want it, about like that. Okay. So I'll put my anvil in here like this, which will hold that in place. And I wound up going back to the Pace tool because I found the angle on this is more shallow than my homemade one, and it works better. So I made my pokey stick too pokey. Let's wiggle that guy around and flatten that ferrule out. Like so. The flat end on my homemade tool is good for flattening this the rest of the way out though. Like so. And of course our trace slipped out of position. That's okay, we got it. Now we can put the anvil on the top side. Hold our trace in place. Now sometimes you can kind of get the trace, if you have a longer trace, you can get it tacked on the board before you flatten out the ferrule. There we go. Okay. Finally, we've got 2 ferrules pushed through there, so our LED will have a nice anchor point, and I will solder on these 2 pieces and get those trimmed down. And since these ferrules are much larger than the original holes, I'll have to make sure they're not shorted out to each other. And we'll put that LED back in there. Wasn't that easy? I smeared a little flux on here, and what I'll do now is try to tack the repair trace segment to the existing trace. A little fresh solder. Try to do this so you guys can see it. There we go. Alright, so now we've got the ferrule connected to the trace, connected to the original trace. I'm going to try to do the same thing here. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, now that we checked to make sure we're not shorting, I'm going to slip the LED in here. It's kind of a guess how far this LED should stick off the board since we didn't have it on there to begin with. So maybe if we pop him in there like that. Yeah, it looks like if we just barely have the lead sticking through the back of the board, you know, a couple millimeters, it'll be fine. Give this a dab of solder. Give that one a dab of solder. And I'm just giving it a little more time there to let the solder all flow out. Oh, he's crooked. There we go. And we've got megohms, but if I check from, let's say, the LED lead here, down here to where it goes, okay, with all that pesky soldering and experimenting with the different ferrules out of the way, let's take a look at our belt issue. And this reflective coating is throwing off the exposure on the camera. I apologize for that. But by the time I figure out the menu system on the camera, I imagine that we'll have this sorted. So we'll just put up with the wacky exposure. All 3 of these screws are the same. Here we have all of our chips. This is a 6301, which is like a Motorola 6800 in a microcontroller form, and it has just a little bit of memory, and they've got a few other chips on here, a custom brother chip, that type of thing. So Blue Logic, it's basically just a very, very simplified disk drive. The Tandy Portable Disk Drive 1, TPDD1, stored a whopping 100K, whereas this guy is a staggering 200K. Get rid of that screw in the corner, which is the same as the other 3. And what am I forgetting? Oh, yes. Ribbon cable. There we go. Pop this open, we can kind of get in here and see things. Poke that ribbon cable loose. Ah, damn. See, I pop that lever out of position again. And we can fold our board out to the side. going to mark this side as being black, and I believe these guys are keyed, but just in case, I'll give them a mark. That never hurts, does it? On these little connectors, I'm just giving it a wiggle with the pliers. That helps if they're stubborn. Let's get that one off of there, and there we go. Okay. Oh yeah, we still got some belt goobers on the board. Before I break something, I will fix this arm again. There. Okay. I've got a little alcohol in a container here. I'm just gonna try to get any last remnants of the old belt off of this guy. Just a pulley. It is coated in old belt. Yeah, that'll stick to the new belt and cause you grief. I got that all cleaned up in there and slipped the belt back on, and that's just fine. And I'm assembling the board here. One tip here is that you need to tighten the screw before putting the little RF shield on. But there's 3 more screw holes around here. So if you start those screws to keep everything aligned, just like that, then you can tighten this guy. And pull these 3 back out, and then they'll be aligned when you go to put the RF shield on. Now with all that belt goo cleaned up and the belt back in its rightful spot, I'm going to very carefully open this guy up. Give the head a bit of a clean. Clean all around that. I'm going to take a look at the linear rails here. I'll take just the slightest amount of grease. Put some on the rails. Smear that around with the other end of the Q-tip. You don't need much here, and too much is as bad as not enough. I don't know if I'll be able to drive this manually or not. Yeah, here we go. Just a little knob on the back. I took some time to clean up both halves of the case, mainly to get rid of any last vestiges of the previous belt. We don't want one of those landing on a disc, and I replaced this little ribbon here, which goes in there to make it easier to pull the batteries out. And once I cut that to the exact length, I'll melt this end to keep it from fraying. But as this cord is so short, I think we'll try to reassemble it loosely in the case to test it out. I suspect that that belt being off of the drive roller would have changed the speed and thus wouldn't have worked. So we'll just go on the assumption that it will be okay now. And that may have been the wrong thing to do, but we'll see. Alright, this is a little tricky because we have to kind of try to drop everything in here as a set. And our power supply hooks up like this. Someday I may build an extension cable with this type of connector on it to plug into the power supply so I can feed it with my bench supply, but I don't work on all that many of these. And how does that go on there? Like so. All right. Now, I need to get this whole thing in here and plug in that power connection at the back. Okay, There we go. And it looks like our drive is setting into place as it should. That's good. Remember, I stuck these two screws back in here just to keep track of them. I have one of the Tandy AC adapters. These are center negative. Okay, I believe off is down. So we'll plug it in. If we turn it on, yeah, I'll get you zoomed down there so you can see that. The other thing you'll notice is when I turn it off, the LED will flash just briefly. If I installed the LED correctly. Can't see it. But you can watch the head move here as I turn it on and off. It homes itself, so it's seeing the home sensor. That's good. Got my Tandy 102 out, which has TS-DOS installed. I've got a new double density disk that's an 720K, 800K disk, not a 1.44. Insert the disk into the drive, snap it down in there. That looks good. It pulled the window open. And if we go into TS-DOS, tell it to look at the disk. It's spinning the disk and it's looking for the directory. And it's telling us it's not formatted. So if we hit F5 to format it, yes. And it does look like it's formatting our disk. Excellent. And it says we're formatted. Now I don't know if I have any, I don't have any programs saved on this thing. So what if we just create a simple basic program? Hey, it works. Oops, there we go. We'll save that as hey.ba. This is saving it to the computer, the RAM in the computer that is. Now we see it's there, so if we go back into TS-DOS, select that and say save, save as. So we can give it a different name on disk than it is in the computer RAM. And that looks fine. Now I'm going to delete it from the computer. Okay, then we'll look in the disk directory. We see our Hey BA there, and I will load it. Load as. Okay, we'll go back to the main menu here, and there's our program. Yay, it works. All right. We can load and save. Now, there is a slight possibility that the track 0 sensor, the home sensor on this guy, is a little out of alignment. I'm not guessing that's the case because it got the knock right here. And I think other than this LED being loose and the belt being off track, I don't think there's anything else wrong with this little guy. So it's working really good. I was slightly incorrect before. This LED is the error LED. And the one on the very front here, which you can just see my finger barely pointing at, it's right here, is the activity LED, and that's working. I'm still concerned about this error LED not showing anything. I wonder if we can make it display an error. Ask it to look at the disk. No disk and drive. Yeah, that was not flashing the error light. a little handheld shaky cam here. I hooked the scope probe up across the LED so I can see if we're getting that glitch on turn off, like we sometimes do. And this is going to be a low going glitch because I've got the scope probe hooked up backwards. I'm going to turn it on. Yeah, we saw the pulse there, so that might be okay. We just need to simulate a condition which should cause that LED to turn on. And one of those is low battery, so I will rig that up right now. Okay, we have a red glowing LED. Still have the scope hooked up. I had to turn down the power supply voltage using the bench supply, which you can probably hear in the background. I turned it down to 4 volts. Without this trying to run the motor and everything, it took that low voltage to where the power supply board couldn't keep up, and then eliminated the LED. So generally on these, you can turn the switch on and off a few times and you can see the LED flash, and it'll give you an indication if the power supply is producing voltage, but evidently that's not always a good test. So you can, however, get it to turn on by applying just 4 volts. Now, to fix this little crack in this corner, I've got a tiny bit of acetone in a syringe. I'm going to hold that together and just feed out a drop of acetone at a time. And I'll turn it back upside down. Yeah, see, I leaked some through and got my finger on it. That's the danger with you using the acetone, is you can get that mess right there. The trick is you've got to get just a drop or two on there and then turn it upside down so it doesn't seep through the crack. So I'll let this set up and then I'll clean up this mess I made. So what I did is I took a little dab of the Novus No. 2 plastic polish and polished up this edge, and you can see it got rid of most of that nasty looking stuff from my fingerprint. We can still slightly see the crack there, but that's always going to be there. And then I'll wipe down the whole thing with this No. 1 and give it a nice clean. Also wanted to point out that the proper orientation with this power switch is so when you slide it up toward power, you see the red. Slide it down, and you don't. So now I'll put my piece of tape on here, and then we'll get this whole thing put back together. Now we'll get this popped back together. So I've got the switch taped down so it's down. So I'll make the switch match here. Okay, now these 2 front screws do not hold the cover on, so we can start those. We will sneak the top cover on, just like that. Pop in our other 2 screws. There we go. We can pull our tape off and everything works like it should. Just putting tape on those buttons makes it so much easier to put back together. Got some batteries popped in here, and the ribbon comes all the way over and into the latch hole here, which isn't ideal. So I think to give us enough to hold on to and to not interfere with the latch, we want it to be about this long. Slice it off there like that. And I'm going to take my soldering iron, and it's not on the tip part that I'm soldering with, but kind of on the barrel Just touch it down on the edge like that. That just melts the very edge of the ribbon, keeps it from fraying. Now we've got enough to pull up on and pop our batteries out, which makes things a lot easier. I'm going to try to hold this up here to get rid of the reflections. And I've got the drive with batteries in it connected to the computer, which is on the AC adapter. I've got the RS-232 cable plugged in here. That is one thing, if you find one of these drives and it doesn't come with the cable, this guy, you'll need to make a cable. It's not just wire, there's actually an RS-232 level shifter inside of this connector. I will put a link to a website below where you can download plans to make your own cable if you need one. So now I am going to pop the drive open, insert the disk. We will select TS-DOS. There we go, and we'll hit F4, ask it to look at what's on the disk. You can see our light blinking, and it says we have Hey Birt on there. So if we press F1 to load that, say we want to load as fgh.ba, just to give it a random name. Okay. Go back to the menu. You can see we have FGH here now. Go all the way back. Yeah, we're in the main menu. Now we can go down to there. And we just loaded Hey Birt off of the disk. Excellent. Well, that wasn't too bad. Just a little cleaning up, fixing a broken LED, and getting rid of some old belt goo. And we're all back in business now. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode taking a look at this Tandy portable disk drive number 2. This one didn't have too many problems, just needed a little cleanup, needed the belt put back on right, and we did a repair job on that loose LED. Had a little confusion there with whether it worked or not, but we found a new and better way to test it by applying 4 volts to the input and letting it turn on the low battery circuitry. So that's another good tool to put in the mental toolbox. We tested it out, we formatted a disk, loaded and saved files, and I would say that we're in good shape now. I'm really happy to have this as part of my collection of old Tandy slab top stuff. And it even came with the head protect card, which I will put back in there for storage. I'd like to take a moment to say thanks to everyone who helps support the Hey Birt channel through Patreon and other means. It's greatly appreciated. If you would like to find out some more information about that, well, just look in the description down below. There's some links in there. If you have any questions or comments, I sure would love to hear from you. Just leave them in the comment section down below. And if you are not subscribed already, well, what you waiting on? If you look down below, you'll see this rectangular button that says subscribe in there. Just click on that guy. And once you've done that, click on that bell-shaped icon so YouTube will be nice enough to let you know just as soon as I post a new video. And I would like to have 1 or 2 more of these Tandy themed videos this month, so let me know what you think about that idea. Well, until next time, bye.